Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick update on my experience with the Sony CyberShot RX100 Mark IV. Now this is one of the most highly anticipated cameras of the year, at least in my opinion, because it takes the RX100 brand, which already is basically unmatched in the entire industry, and brings features that, well, at least I was waiting for quite patiently, specifically 4K video. That doesn't mean much to many. Backlit 20 megapixel 1-inch sensor that is a great or best-in-class performer across the entire industry, as well as 960 frames per second high-speed video capture recording, which really is a matter of personal preference. I would call that more of the gimmick element of this camera. We got an improved EVF, which is a great thing now with, I believe it's more than twice the resolution, broader spectrum of field of view as well as color gamut. So a lot to like in an improved EVF, especially one that did get criticism, fair or unfair, considering that Sony did actually literally put it in a spot that nobody expected an EVF could go. We have a 180-degree tilting display. If you're interested in selfies or just composing different shots, it definitely will make life a little bit easier. All metal construction, flash is center mounted, zoom ring that can be, of course, designated for zoom or focus depending on your personal preference, as well as you can do a step zoom as well. It's all a matter of what you personally want. Sony has gotten rid of some of the modes here on the dial because, after all, the RX is directed at a more prosumer segment that is looking to get professional results without all of the traditional professional gear. And that's exactly what the RX100 has always been about, except this is easily the best generation. You know, whether or not it is worth the $950 really comes down to how much you care about getting UHD video in your pocket. I personally, I'm not going to say I can't put a price on it because, of course, as anyone who follows my channel already knows, I'm pretty good about putting a price on it. And I do feel $950 is pricey, but when you look at the roadmap, the history of the RX100 line, the bump up in price made sense. I'm not saying I'm happy about it, but it was appropriate considering that none of the RX100s have literally been discontinued. They're all just different price points for different consumers now. You can see the NFC contact point. We do also have Wi-Fi on board, no GPS, charging via micro USB, as well as HDMI out. Battery life on here a little bit lower, especially when recording in 4K, than the Mark III or Mark II or any of the previous RX100s, but I'm specifically saying the Mark III because of the AVC HD codec that it works inside of, and that's simply just a matter of dealing with 4K video. It's inherent that it's going to sip a little bit more juice than 1080p. Now, as far as stabilization, we do have steady shot on board. I have noticed that it could be better. That's going to be my first critique of this camera. I wish the stabilization was better, and there are actually 3 tiers of stabilization available, but only one when it comes to shooting UHD video. So maybe that's something we see on the 5th revision of this camera. Wish it was here in this model, but again, we have to take one step at a time. I'm not trying to be cute. That's literally where things are at. But build quality is exceptional. 16 frames per second continuous. You can see how quickly it powers on, and right there, if I tilt the screen up, you can see the HX90V, which I think is a great camera to complement this. And basically, you can see it hunting a little bit there, not locking in as it should. Now we've got a nice lock. Neutral density filter is built in on this camera, which is another nice thing that Sony realized prosumers do like. So we do now have neutral density filter, and you can select, whether or not you want to use it. And that's what the RX100 line is all about, giving you more control and better results, something you'd expect from a different grade of camera. And that 16 frames per second shooting, you can see I'm just holding it down, it's going, it finally stopped. And I do have a card in here, and that will basically also relate to how fast a card you have in here. But if you plan on shooting any UHD video, you have to have at least a UHS 3 Class 10 card. The 16 frames per second is a nice thing to have, and the autofocus has been relatively solid in my experience. You do have clear image zoom, you can see right there. Basically, as I step through the different parts of the focal range, right there we break through the 70 and go all the way up to 2x magnification. There's also digital zoom beyond the clear image zoom. So we've got quite a bit going on here when it comes to extending that Carl Zeiss class above and beyond what you're getting out of the box immediately in a traditional optical sense. In terms of the menu, that's what I also wanted to share with all of you, besides just giving this camera the praise that it is due, because it is really a great camera. And right now, I've seen very few complaints about the Mark IV, and that's because, again, it just builds off of a brand that no one else can beat. In fact, no one else can touch. And people who are asking me about the Canon, the 7 and how it compares, they are not in the same league. I don't know how anyone could even think that. Canon is so far behind Sony when it comes to this camera, as well as even now the larger full frame bodies like the A7R Mark II, which is shaping up to probably be one of the best interchangeable lens cameras ever made. Something that Canon and Nikon are both kind of, I think, crying about in a corner somewhere. And I'm not trying to insult Canon or Nikon fanboys. Let's be clear, Canon and Nikon have been a gold standard for a long time, but when you stop innovating, you're going to lose business. And that's something Sony's been focusing on, because we know Sony's always been about video cameras, but still cameras is where they've been playing catch up now since they bought Konica Minolta many, many years ago. And I have to say, they are finally getting there. The E-mount has really become a dominant force, to say the very least, from where it began back in the mid-2000s. So let's take a look at the menu system. And keep in mind that it does matter what you're in. I'm in the auto mode because I think that's where a lot of people will live, even though they think they're going to use every manual control that this camera has to offer. And quite frankly, if you're spending this much coin, you should be, or you should understand what you're working with. So let's start right at the beginning. And this is just a quick overview. So of course, your image size right there, and you can see you've got 3 different options. Your aspect ratio right there. And this will affect your zoom as well, your actual quality mode, whether you want to shoot in the JPEG realm or RAW. My usual preference is the RAW plus JPEG, but I have been shooting, for the most part right now, just in extra fine JPEG land, simply to see what this is going to work like for most average users who aren't going to jump into Lightroom, because most people don't, even though they might pretend they're going to. Your image size for your dual record feature, that's another nice element that's built into this camera. I'm not going to really get too heavy into that. I'll save that for the full review. Your file format when it comes to video, you can see we've got some options there, 4K in XAVCS, or you can drop to just traditional HD in XAVCS, which is going to give you better video quality than traditional AVC HD. And then last but not least, my least favorite as well, MP4, which I wouldn't mind seeing go away, but Sony's maintaining it for obvious reasons. You can then also set your bit rate as well as your frame rate if you want 30p as opposed to 24p, and of course the bit rate that accompanies that. So it's really a matter of personal preference what you want to go with. The dual video record, you can see you can switch that on or off, and as well as your HFR settings, and this is basically, those of you that are interested in that high speed film, this is what it's all about. You can see right there, we have our different frame rate, the bit rate staying solid. And right there, the frames per second. This is going to equate to different quality modes, by the way, whether you go with the 960 all the way down to the 240. Your priority, is it quality or the length of the actual shot itself? Because I think at the highest quality, you're limited to 2 seconds. And of course, the timer for starting, ending. And go ahead and back out of that. You can see the panorama whited out because we're not in the panorama mode. Your drive mode, basically what I accessed before, you have a timer as well as some additional features, bracketing, white balance. I mean, you have to be in full manual mode to have access to all of these things. So really, this is more about just giving all of you an overview. Again, your bracket settings, your flash mode, your red eye reduction, your flash compensation. We've also got the focus mode, what mode you're actually looking for, whether you want to go full manual, auto, etc. Your illuminator, whether you want that on all the time or off. That's another personal, at least in my opinion, a matter of personal preference. Exposure compensation, as well as everything else that you would expect to see here. The neutral density filter is on auto in auto, no surprise there, but in any of the manual modes, priority modes, you do have control of that. And the neutral density filter is a big deal, in my opinion. Metering mode, white balance control, your HDR control, the creative style, the picture effects, they're all there. It's all a matter of whether or not you actually want to use them. That, to me, the picture effects are definitely more gimmick-oriented, something I don't think needs to live in the RX world, but of course Sony would do themselves a disfavor by taking away features. More is more when it comes to that. Your center lock-on autofocus, you can turn that on or off, obviously. Smile detection, which I've actually had some laughable moments with, but I don't really depend on that before, or rather at all. I'm not going to get into what happened there if you're all very curious. I'll save that for the full review. It is comical. The point is it didn't detect a face. That's all I'm going to say. It detected something else. In terms of other things, the dual record I mentioned before, the soft skin effect is there, auto object framing, another intelligent element of Sony's software. The auto mode, you can actually select which one you want. This used to be on the dial, now it's in the menu. And there's a reason, because I think Sony realized it confused users. It wasn't necessary, so they buried it a little bit, and that's not a big deal in my opinion. It's really a matter of which you'd rather work with. Scene selection, not available here, again, because we're in auto, and auto does that for you. Steady shot, you can see it's on. Steady shot. Now, you'll notice that intelligent active and active are both unavailable in auto, and that's because it's right now because of 4K video capture. If I was not in 4K, we would have access to the active and intelligent active. So if you require that extra stabilization, you basically have to drop out of UHD. Now, I wish those were available. That's something I'm hoping we're going to see in the next revision. Your color space, whether you want to go with Adobe or sRGB, matter of personal preference, professional use, you have that option there. Auto slow shutter, your audio recording. Let's see what else we've got here. Your microphone level, you do have control of that. Wind noise reduction, I do have turned to on right now. And then memory. Beyond that, let's jump to the settings. And I'm just going to run through these quickly because I'm really going to save this for the full review. You can see I've got the rule of thirds in effect there on the grid. Auto review, your peaking levels, peaking color, your exposure, pre-autofocus, whether or not you want the camera to automatically do that. The zoom speed, I mentioned you can put that on a step instead, whether or not you want clear image zoom or digital to be available or simply optical, you have that ability. With this camera, because of the 1-inch sensor and its incredible quality with the Zeiss glass pairing, I do let the clear image zoom live. It does work relatively well in extending a camera that does have a limited focal range, so it makes sense to me personally. Your viewfinder monitor control right there, because both this as well as basically every camera from Sony these days does have the ability to detect whether or not you're using the LCD screen or the EVF. Let's see what else. The shutter type, whether or not you want the mechanical or electronic. Of course, electronic is the preferred silent one in my opinion, something that I cannot wait for on the A7R Mark II, something that Sony has really made a relevant and beyond desirable feature. Self-portrait timer, face recognition, registration rather, it'll do that, believe it or not. And your zoom function on the ring I was mentioning before, you can basically set that to what you want, standard, quick, or step. And the movie button, whether or not you want that turned on or off, that goes back to the NEX 7 days when people complained enough that Sony did a firmware update to say, hey, we'll shut that off if you really hate or you're accidentally hitting it so often. Wheel lock. Now, this is all about your Wi-Fi option, setting to smartphone, computer, viewing on a television, one-touch NFC mode, your airplane mode, WPS push for just a simple connection to your home network, access point settings, all of those things. Your application list, because remember, the Play Memory Store is there. You can get online, download all sorts of apps for this. I may eventually do a video about that because with all, the video grading app that exists now in the Play Memory Store, that's something that's going to be, I would say, great for someone out in the field who wants to instantly grade footage without having a computer or anything else other than their camera. So that's a very cool app. Of course, you have time-lapse, things like that I've been using for a long time now since they were introduced. And Sony keeps adding to that market. Some apps are free, like the remote control application, as well as several others. But then the ones that really, allow the camera to do more than what it can out of the box, that traditionally would require other equipment, Sony does charge for, and I understand why. And there's an introduction right there just to give you exactly that. I don't really want to go through it, so I'm going to back out of that. Playback mode, you have some control, of course. And last but not least, the actual settings itself. So whether we're talking about monitor brightness, the viewfinder brightness, your audio volume settings, your menu, everything is here. Power save, HDMI output, because you can tell it exactly what you want to see come out of there, whether it's automatic or you want the UHD/1080p combo. Auto, of course, is going to auto-detect what it needs to display or deliver. So it's really a matter, again, of personal preference and what you need to get out of this camera. And that's what's so great about it. It's so versatile on so many levels, and that's why Sony markets the RX100 as a line of cameras designed for pros. But again, just quickly running through the balance of what's there. And finally, of course, last but not least, the version of the camera. You can see we're at 1.10. That's our firmware version in case Sony decides to update, which I assure you they will. This camera is a beast, and it's a flagship model that Sony is going to improve as much as they possibly can, especially with that $950 price, and then a setting reset if you want to actually start from the beginning. But that pretty much rounds things out. I just wanted to give a quick look at how it performs. And again, from an autofocus perspective, I know I mentioned that the HX90V there, it was hunting initially at the beginning. That was because I was zoomed out or zoomed in a little too much. If I go ahead and take it in tight, it's the actual distance we're dealing with here. You can see it's locking on relatively quickly, and you know, the output, again, let me back it up a little bit. You're not going to see it on camera. They're locked, and if I go ahead and just take a look at this, so there's the image of the HX90V. Let's go ahead and zoom in on that image, and you'll get an idea of exactly how good at least this display is capable of reproducing. And we're really zoomed in here. I mean, you can see things starting to get noisy, but this is, you know, beyond 100% crop there. So very impressed with this camera so far. Having the extra UHD video as well as the high-speed recording, just, you know, cherries on top of what already was a best-in-class line of product. And the build quality still best in the business as far as I'm concerned. No memory card in there right now. We're just going off of internal memory. But yeah, a lot to like, and also very expensive, but I think well worth it if you're looking for a best-in-class imaging device that's really going to do everything you possibly could want, all from the comfort of your pocket. So no gear bag necessary anymore, folks. You now have a camera that can do everything, just about literally, except give you true telephoto capability in the palm of your hand. $950, in my opinion right now, one of the best DI devices ever made. And again, Sony setting the standard, which they've been doing now for several years since I started not only enjoying, but reviewing their products on a regular basis. And Sony, if you're listening, it'd be nice if you sent over some of these. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.